more minutes for people to come in. But most of you are somewhat familiar with me, and so I'm going to cheat. And instead of me introducing me, are you willing to give a line or two of, like, Lee, if you want to, like, who's Steph? Why are you here?
Okay. and I just saw Margaret trying to come on, make sure.
Hello, Margaret.
She's landed. It looks like she's looking for the
headphones.
That's right.
So
yeah.
So Lee, how do I know you? How have we played together?
Yeah. The way we know each other is actually through other kinds of masterminds and different venues where I was trying to learn about business. But the focus for me became when I wanted to know more about how to express myself within that business. And I watched you, Miss Steph, on stage, sharing stories, talking about what you did. And I learned so much more about your background. You know, you had published a book at a very young age, dedicated a lot of time to being a ghostwriter. And you had created some pretty darn impressive websites. And I had no idea you'd done any of that kind of stuff. So it was great to be able to see the multifaceted side of Steph, and not to mention that was an awesome photographer to boot. So this is like the multidimensional Steph. But yeah, that was really how we met. Both actually at that time really looking to see how to expand online business and make it not better for me, better for the people that I would bring into it. Like how to create this experience that was authentic and creative and in the moment and really useful to somebody, and not just be like everybody else.
Well, cool. And Lee, you came in, we first played with websites. And looking at some of you already had most of your branding, but some of it was the application of that branding, and how do you apply the colors that you've been given into the wireframes of web pages. And then once you figured that out, then what words do you put into those pages, and how does it feel you? Now I know when we first started working together, what was your main business leading was really just like 1/100th of what you were really doing, and you've now stepped into fully mode instead of into one piece of that. But that was like when you came into the course, and when we first started working together, it was not for Lee to be Lee. It was for you to create this business that you thought you needed to create. And slowly but surely you realized how much of you was in there anyway, and why it was so hard to grasp, because it was just such a tiny piece of what you really offer under that umbrella. Yeah.
And in the working on all of that, part of it too was that from the coaching that I had done to that point, it was more how I could fit into an online model. And the reason I had narrowed myself down so much, niched myself too narrow, most people are too broad. I had gone too narrow to one tiny little piece of what I could offer people. And part of that was because I wanted to fit into the model that someone else saw for me. And that's part of what I wanted to do here, was to see if I could break out of that model, still have something marketable, and then it could actually be a fuller part of me and all I know and have to give. So that's a big shift, because a lot of what I'm going to say is taught is how to fit into current online marketing styles and ways of being and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. Laura, you are somewhat new, and yet within our very first training pretty much said identical words. Yeah. So how has this been for you over the last 2 weeks and getting to know and play? Because Lee and I have been playing together for a couple of years, and you and I have been playing together for a couple of weeks. So how is it? What have you seen here? What has it been like? And because I know that whole niching, wait, I can do more than one thing came up too. Yeah.
when you've been in business for 25 years and have so many skill sets, you are taught to niche to, like Lee said, to the point where it becomes like silly, I would say the word, and I've learned to always think outside the box. I'm always been a non-traditionalist. So it was a breath of fresh air to have you say, yes, let's go with what your skill sets are, instead of trying to niche down to the point of, I call it ridiculousness, because sometimes, like what Lee's saying, you niche down and then you're like, well, what's left? So, and especially you are a multi-passionate entrepreneur in full force. So it's like, that it's so true. So it's been a pleasure, and I've enjoyed it immensely. And there's been moments that have been extremely challenging because you've had us tap into things that aren't always pleasant, that we have to recall in our memory. So, but I liked when you'd give us examples, even in your own journey, how things weren't always pleasant, but when you came out the other side, you had, additional tools that really made you shine now and are able to help more people. So, in alignment with being heart-centered entrepreneurs. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm glad to hear that you've received...
I think oh, there you are.
I'm here. I think my internet's being a little goofy. It should be clearer now, yes, with the camera off. I'll try to pop back on in...
I keep getting...
Oh, no. I see it freezing a little bit. Am I here on you now?
We can hear you.
Great.
Yep, we can hear you. Yeah.
Well, then I'm extra glad that I chose to do an introduction through you instead of myself. Julia, do you have something to add or difference? Because we've played together in a little different realm. So Laura just did a free 2-week challenge with me. Lee's done a website build and writing that converts with me. And Julia's done retreat and writing that converts, and some of the free, you both have done some of the free stuff too, yeah?
Oh, yeah. And I guess I've known you about 2 years, and it took me a year to decide to do the retreat. And the retreat was great because it got me into a mode of being able to pull things out. It's hard for me to sit down and write, and so the retreat was really good in that it helped me. You gave a container for me to be able to create stuff. And I didn't do this video challenge because I'm in the middle of a move, but I did the last video challenge, and that was great. It was just like boom, 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 be able to get that out. And I think what happens is you're helping me to see how the stories in my life experiences tell the story that engage people and want to experience things. So I'm starting to notice the stories so that I can share stories to people to engage them. So it's the storytelling piece that because before it was just marketing words. It was like, how to market to somebody, how to make an offer, blah, blah, blah. But there really weren't a lot of stories. So it's helping me to recognize stories in my own life and how that engages people and how they feel connected because they see a story in themselves. Or they see themselves in that story.
Yeah, I've gotten to know so much more about you, and I know we switch stories back and forth. Well, I went through that too. Well, I went through it in this way. Well, I went through it in that way. Well, and it's how we learn. I mean, it's how we've been wired since birth and from generations upon generations that came before us is to learn through story. That's Aesop fables. That's the moral of that's pretty much every story in every religious text out there is, how do you learn what is the societal and cultural norm? And it's taught through story, as well as safety precautions and dreaming stories and overcoming stories. And we've looked at a couple of these different pieces, like in the video challenge that we just did, one of those first questions is, when did you become your own hero? Which is very much an overcoming story. When did you empower yourself to move forward in the path that you're on? But that's a question that you could probably each answer in at least 10 different times in your life and different memories that come forward when you think about it. The trick is then to look at what you're doing in business and pick the story that helps illustrate how you became that expert, while still also revealing a piece of who you are. And that's a lot of what we do in just different realms and different spaces. So like at retreat, what we did, it's the same curriculum of what we cover in Writing That Converts, but taught in a very different manner, in a different flow, in a different container. It becomes almost an entirely different experience. And Julia's like, yup, you know, like, and it's true, because what you bring to it, as well as what kind of space you give to it, can be very different. So some will come into a program and it's, well, if it's a 90-minute session, then that's all I need to give every week. And typically I say, if you're 90 minutes in, then it's 90 minutes out. Or you have to look at this 10-week program of being 10 months of content that you're creating, and it's just put it all in your hands. So when you need the tool, each one's there for you to grab instantly and use when you want. Lee is a great example of this because she's had so many different bios over the years. And each time that business changes slightly, the bio has to change slightly. And this last time it was like, well, it's time to go rewrite it all. And the reality is I'm pretty surely that you went back into what you were doing before the rescue piece. And even as an author, when you were working with all different animals and not just one type of animal, and started looking into who were you before this marketing world told you who you had to be.
Yeah. I actually just completely just rewrote it from scratch. You know, like going into who I actually was, and without even considering business, so to speak. It's like what called me to it. So going like way back, like who was I? I was in a corporate office looking out a window and had this epiphany: I cannot do this anymore. There's no stock options that are worth this. There's no retirement or whatever you want to call it dangling out there that can keep me in this kind of a prison. So I wouldn't talk about that if I was talking about being a mindful pet parent. And I wouldn't even talk so much about the book, because the book, like you said, had a lot to do with many animals. And that had a specific teaching that went along with it. So yeah, it was about going back and really looking actually much deeper at who I am, why I do what I do. And as we said just a minute ago, with Laura, is not niching it down to the small niche, but saying to even what you would even call like, what would I want an audience to know about me? Because I was writing website copy, and not everybody who shows up on my website will actually know me. Mm-hmm. So it's how to pull those two pieces together too, to have enough of a bio that interests the people who do know what I do, and they came here because of that, but also the people who land there a bit cold.
Yeah, that's the simple thing of, until just a couple months ago, never anywhere on my site did I talk about having a prior career as a photographer. And while it's still a very side or small piece of my business, it wasn't even until January that I had a camera, because I got rid of my camera 10 years ago when I left the career. And at the time it was a film camera, but it's something that I've always felt passionate about. Everywhere I am, I'm taking photos on my phone constantly. And after one or two photo shoots for friends on my cell phone, because they needed new headshots, I had a client buy me a camera and say, great, you're flying to me and you're giving me an entire rebrand, because I need all new photos from it, not just a headshot, but I need all new website banners. And each one needs to be a different emotion and a different outfit and a different location. So I'm going to fly you down. We're going to do this. Because he knew that this was in my background, even though it's something that I wasn't leading with. And then, you have a day like just yesterday, I went to visit one of my best friends here is going through what I went through 10 years ago, which is that space between knowing you're about to lose your mom, but it's not there yet. So going into terminal caregiving. And so she asked to hang out, and I went over to her house, and and it's the first, she's moved. It's the first time I've seen her new space, and hanging on her walls are photographs that I gifted her 2 years ago. that to her mean the world. And they have one of the best locations in the entire house, of course, in a hallway. So it's dark because they're black and whites and they're prints, and she doesn't want the direct light on them. But absolutely, they're there being displayed. And to her, that means as much. And of course, I've copywritten with her as well. But to her, the art spoke to her as well. Lee, we came in and started working on the art, the visuals of your business, even though you came to me as a writing coach, right? So just because you do one thing doesn't mean that's where you have to stick. And it doesn't mean it's the only thing about you. But I had mentioned enough times, like, oh, you know, and those things that you might not know about me. You might not know that I worked for the 5th largest event photography company in our nation. You might not know that I've worked for L'Oreal. You might not know this stuff about me, but it's why when people come to me for consultation on their website, for the graphics, for their wireframing, that it's always been simple for me. Or how my first book was an art book, because it's the world that I grew up in. It doesn't matter that I don't have a degree in it. It's what I've always been passionate about. But that's also one of the, like, I have degrees in writing, really easy for me to put writing as a skill to sell, to create a course. Everything else is what makes that writing so good. I mean, you could have the right words, but if those right words are all in one paragraph with 10 commas, no one's ever going to get the message out of it because of the way the words are being presented, the visual of the words themselves, and the white space that you use to deliver it. It carries the meaning and the message in and of itself. So.
Yeah, and I think also like when working on bios and speaking about yourself, which is like what a lot of where the videos were, to get into that realm, it's like to pull the what could be disparate things that we've all done and bring them together, and then they do have a common thread. So it's been able to pull that. So in doing something about, you know, if we're working on bio and we're pulling up all this stuff. So Laura has 25 things she can excel in. She can still pull a thread through that creates a feeling of who she is. And then there need to be some images that capture that feeling. And I mean, it sounds kind of weird, but like when we were working on the mindful pet parenting, which I include in the bio because that does fit with who I am and what I do. When we looked at the images, we could probably went through 1,000 images to get 10. I mean, and that sounds kind of funny. People might think, oh, you're getting a little bit overboard with this. But it really does matter how those visuals and those words come together, and that each one holds a thread, which is the brand. So it's not complicated, but yet there are nuances to it that you really need to know and feel into and get a grasp of to make it all, you know, work coherently. So people don't land and say, I still don't get it. Who is she? What does she really do? Because then I don't think they don't know how to relate to me unless they feel that thread.
Yeah.
So
Margaret, I love that you're here today. Because Margaret, when we went through these original questions 2 years ago, which is what we are going through now, or we just finished going through the first piece of in the video challenge, it was part of a much larger thing. It was a 30-day challenge, not 10 days. So we've only done a third of this challenge. And Margaret was part of that original group. And even before it was a challenge, it's what I used as a welcome sequence. So when I would take in a client for a big sales page or a book project, this is what I would give them as their quick start, right? Was these questions. And then I turned it into a 30-day challenge. Well, Margaret, as well as a couple other people who went through as a writing challenge and wrote out their answers to each of these, ended up writing their entire website. Haha, I tricked you. And they, they created all the copy that they needed to move forward. And then it was a matter of going through these modules, figuring out which story then applied to which aspect of what they were creating, where to implement it. And when I got ready to launch this again, Margaret reached out on Facebook, and the first thing she said is, great, I'm ready to start implementing these. Those words that were written 2 years ago, they are so spot on that they're still exactly who she is today. And it's not going to change because it's the core of you. How and where you're applying these is what changes. But what the story is and who you are, that's what we're looking at in a very authentic, veil-released way. And so to hear that that you're implementing them now is like, yay, go Margaret, right? And it's beautiful. And I also remember you going through the very first time I taught writing that converts online instead of as a retreat. And I think it was like week 8 or 7, somewhere when we got past the halfway point. And it was, well, I'm searching. It's in inquiry and clarity. And all of a sudden we got past the halfway point and the entire group was like, Margaret, I see you. And we could all of a sudden really understand what you were here for. Yeah. Margaret, can I unmute you?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
So how was it for you? It's been a while now. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like a very long time. It's because many things happened. I feel that way. I think, well, listen to you is kind of connected to the initial emotions and that experience at the same time. And I appreciate very much. So it helped me I still have the books to wave. Very, very behind. I was born in China. So left 30 some years. It's a freaking shocking experience to reunite with my friends in the youth and my grade school teachers and the whole and I'm disconnected from the world, like the internet wise. It's very difficult. So I have to do what I have to do for that part of the world, and I did twice, but I haven't finished. I think the mission didn't change, but the challenge is it feels too much responsibility. So I have to leave my work like less priority to somehow to solve the reality, to share my knowledge to the people they don't have, to solve their real panic, the real anxiety. That's part of permission, and I give it to myself, and I try to forgive myself.
I think that there are lots of pieces of my business that I looked at wanting and creating for myself, knowing that I would be able to start on it in maybe 5 years' time. And that's something that you can't beat yourself up for or shame yourself for, is that there's certain things, well, I want this. Well, that's great that you want this, but let's take care of these other things first in order to become who you need to be when you're ready to step into that role. One of the specifics is that 5 years ago, when I did my very first video challenge as a participant, not in leading it, the very first video that I made, I set 3 goals that in my mind were 5-year goals. And there were a handful of people that I met in this video challenge off of that very first video that said, I see you, and we're going to become friends. And we did. We absolutely did. I live in a place where I met a woman who in the video challenge, and this is where she lives. That's how I heard of it, because we became instant friends in a video challenge and have become really good friends in life. She's the first person that I met her in person about 3 months after we did the video challenge, and she handed me money and said, "You're going to go build me a website." And I was like, I don't do that. I don't build websites, right? Like, but I watched you do it for yourself. You can do it for me. It's like, okay, what? No. She's like, but you can do it. You come up with the words, you come up with the visuals, you pick the colors, just go do it. And I'm like, this isn't how it works, and this isn't a product I'm selling. But you know what? 3 years later, guess what? Lee bought a website. Lee was one of those people saying, but you do this stuff and you use the same tools as me, but you figured it out and you've been doing it for 5 years. I'm just figuring it out and I need help. And I was like, okay, well, I can teach you how to WordPress and teach you the tools I use to make it an integrated marketing system, to make it so you can receive money and forms and mailing list on top of just having a website. I can do this. This feels okay. But, it was someone who had pushed me for 3-4 years before I was even willing to consider doing it or saw myself as an expert where I could. And part of that expertise is that 5 years ago, I set that goal that I wanted to become an expert at coding. I never sat down and took a coding course, but over 5 years of messing with WordPress websites, you better believe that a couple of times I white screened my website and had to call and get them to turn on the old version, and other times where I got it perfect and figured out how to do what I wanted it to do. And while I'm not an expert and I'm not fluent, I do know how to code now. And it was something that was it was learned in just the process of becoming a better business owner, not as in this is something that I'm going to learn so I can go offer it, but this is something to make it all work, right? So it's okay if someone else sees something in you that you might not really be ready to step into for now or for a couple of years, or, you know, reviewing where you are. But the goal, the purpose of this is that it's the same person each time, whether you did this 10 years ago or 2 years ago, it doesn't matter. So, but it's someone's going to see it in you before you're willing to admit it to yourself. And some of those people that I met that have urged me consistently to move forward in business are people that I met online, participating in other courses, other people's classes. You know, that's where Leah and I met. That's where Julia and I met. Like, it's how we get to know each other. I'm pretty sure Patty's in that way. And Emily and I met at an event too. And, you know, Laura and Grace, it's great to meet you online. But, you know, we met through online sort of getting ready or into online events. Grace and I were introduced getting about writing that converts, and Laura came in. She was invited we figured this out, right? It was an advertisement for my retreat through a mutual friend that got you onto the list, and you've just kind of been sitting in this, right? So they were both specific event invitations, and then it's just how we got to play before then or during then or in the off. But it's one of the pieces that I feel very strongly about. We talked about this coming into the video challenge. I've brought it up in a few others, but I look at your audience and your community and your tribe as 3 different levels of people, where your audience is the broad base of everyone you're talking to. Your community are the people that are there. They're the people that are on your list, following your page and your groups. They can be paid or non-paid, but they're there to continue to receive. And your tribe are the people that have really experienced what it's like to work with you, that you've invested in each other and making it to that next level. And so when you start looking at these different people that you're speaking to, it also changes how that information is going to be received, right? And so I went into this video challenge being like, all right, well, I'm coming in as part of the community. So I'm here to connect with the community. And instantly I connected with quite a handful of the community. I'm flying to Germany in about 2 weeks' time to go hang out with a woman that I met 5 years ago and have been writing with ever since. Mylene was in the video challenge, that first video challenge that I did years ago. I interviewed her as part of it. It was, it's now a 10-day challenge called Part of Stories That Sell. And she instantly felt seen and heard and hired me to start writing with her, because when she talks it through, it comes out. And when she sits down to write, it becomes a different story. And the words change and everything's a little bit not nearly as grounded as when she's verbalizing it. So she wants someone always to just be that little, let's just bring you back down to earth. Just ground me, right? Let's just ground these words again. But each to their own, but we saw each other instantly because we were both willing to show up instantly. Yeah.
So Steph, when you're looking at, because you just mentioned, you know, a couple of people you came through a promotion. Some people came because you met them online, and so if you were doing website copy or something, or a letter, an email to a broader audience. You're talking more of an audience, maybe community. So when you explore the question, what do they already know? How would you approach that?
For audience, community, or tribe?
That's what I'm saying.
For this call.
Well,
each one's different. you know?
Yeah, no, and that's what I was thinking about, because on website copy, do you just want to go with audience? And for
in website copy, no, in website copy, you're specifically speaking to one person who somehow is there already. So when it comes to websites, it's directed traffic, right? So there's already some sort of action, or like, it's rare that someone just Googles you, goes to your page and says, great, I'm going to work with this person. The conversions are often through referrals, through someone saying, hey, you should come look at this page, not just I randomly found this page online. And so in that sense, you can make an assumption that they're already familiar with another community member. And so when I talk about some of the work, I talk about it as in, I'm not going to make the assumption that you know who I am and what I do, but I'm going to make the assumption that you're in the right place. And let me tell you why. And it's a different type of communication, because when I'm in an audience, when I'm speaking to a broad base that I don't know who they are, I don't know if they're all the right fit or not. But I know if you're on my website engaging with my words, there's something that has called you to this space in the beginning. And I'm going to assume that this is something you're looking for, or you already would have bounced.
Yeah. So, and it would be the same with the emails that you send out. I mean, no, Laura might not know you, and a friend said, hey, you ought to get on Steph's list.
Yeah.
So Laura goes, okay, great. So she jumps on.
No, emails, I go even more into tribe instead of community personally. So often my emails, I start writing to one person and let it transition when it's ready. So when I put up in the Facebook group, I put up all the prizes, and there's a few sentences that went in the front. Like, I never know what's going to happen in these challenges, but it's really amazing to watch us all investigate. Like, I don't even remember what I said at this point. It was just a couple of sentences. It was written to one person who is participating in that challenge that I was interested in personally inviting into the next group of Writing That Converts, because I feel like it would be a strong asset to the group to have that person in there. If you haven't noticed, that's something that I'm really, I feel very strongly about, is the people that aren't supposed to be there bounce out and will not be part of the group, that the integrity of the group is as important as what we're going to be covering. And so when I speak to my tribe and I use certain languaging, some are very comfortable with it and some aren't, and they move on their way. Grace is nodding your head. Grace, when you emailed me, your question, well, I'm going to speak astrology. I hope that's okay, or I'm not speaking over you. And I'm like, we're good. We can speak astrology, mythology. Like, you pick it, we're good. Like, I'm very comfortable in this realm, and others might not have been. So it's that level of comfort. So when I go in to write an email, I write a heart message to one person that then tends to be so true and can ring so true that it becomes an email to all. And it's just a different way of looking at it. So that's why, and I get it, responses all the time, like, Steph, you are the art of invitation. If I was ready for a program, I would have been in there. And at times I send those emails all individually, and I'll spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 3 hours copying and pasting the same email and sending it out, because it feels like such a personal invitation. And it's because it was. And the reality is that we're often very aligned in our hearts with everyone who's on the call. So if I'm speaking to your heart, Lee, it's the same heart that I'm speaking to in Margaret, and it's the same heart that I'm speaking to in Grace or in Emily or Laura or Pat. Like, you're all heart people, and you're all healers in one realm or another. So wouldn't it make sense that there's that similarity in all of you? You know, a sentence of like, well, I know you did this program before, so if you're looking to renew, of course that wouldn't go out in the general email to everyone. That's what I would add on personalized in your letter or Margaret's letter. Margaret, I know it's been 2 years since you came through. The program's grown, it's changed, we've explored. I mean, the content is still, the slides are literally identical, but the knowledge that I've gained teaching it in this group might be, so here's the renewal rate. Let me just remind you that prior students have an entirely different price point than new students, right? And it's because this content's meant to be played with over and over and over again. It was the design of the program. I'm not going to charge you $3,000 every single time you come through the program, because you've been through it. You're coming through to be part of the community, to support everyone else that's there with your own understanding of what's happening, as well as to work on your next project. You know, you came through one to work on your website, Lee. You come through to work on a course. You come through to work on a book. Everyone comes through for a different reason and a different time. The content's the same. Where and how you're applying it is different. So homepage positioning, it's the art of product positioning. Now, is that product being positioned on your homepage? Or is it being positioned on the back cover of your book that's about to release? Either way, we still need to understand what this product is in a very, very short amount of words. So it's the same piece. It's just a matter of how and where you're going to apply it. Have I lost anyone yet? Do we have questions yet? I haven't even opened anything. We've just been chatting. Is this feeling good? Learning new?
I'll just say, yeah, feeling good, learning, excuse me, feeling good. Well, anyway, both of those. And I don't really get the purpose of today's thing. Maybe it's just, so I don't know how much to be a participant, but I just find it, these are things, the curiosity that's being stimulated. I'm thinking, oh, I'll learn about this when we do the course. Just about sending the emails, for instance. There was that connection about astrology, and you went on from there in your response to me. And that one line that I fed back to you, I mean, that was the one that did it.
I'm
wondering, I'm wondering if you would actually send all those words out to everybody just because it resonated with one. I mean, I don't know how that works, and I'll learn that. But
yeah, Grace, would you like to know? Because I didn't finish it, but I have already I've already gotten ready to share it as a blog post or as a social media post, but it would be slightly different. Okay. So here's what I sent to her, which is going to be posted in social media later today, right? And it says, I'm familiar with astrology, numerology, divination, Reiki, Feng Shui, planets, moon phases, activation, elements, plant medicine, mythology of many cultures, and many more modalities. It's one of the reasons I've been called to work with healers and why healers have often been called to work with me. The truth is that when you dive deep into blue waters, you're able to see better than playing in the river's edge. Still waters run silent, they say. It's in the shallows where the current carries you. Pretty soon you'll swim back to shore and stand in the shimmering sunlight, silky water glistening off of your skin. How do you write copy from there? You write from truth and honesty, with mutual respect for who you are and who you know you'll become. You write from your heart message, letting ancestral knowledge flow through you, bringing a depth of wisdom to the surface for others to touch and feel. My methodology is designed both for inquiry as well as for creation. Often the two go hand in hand, and often people go through the process for different reasons at different times. Mm-hmm. And that'll be an Instagram post that'll go out later. But they were words spoken to Grace. Mm-hmm. Maybe 5 words changed because it wasn't specifically to you, anymore. Now it's going to become the post. Mm-hmm. That was written to one person, and it's the truth of how I feel. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Is that, yes, it's so much fun to go diving deep into the inquiry, but that's where you get to see and find the clarity and then walk back to shore and let it shimmer for everyone else to receive from you. Yeah. And now, are those words that I would have spoken if we were in conversation? Probably not quite like that, but it's truly how I feel.
And that would be my goal, to eventually learn how to bring those two together. Like you look through one eye, you see this, look through this eye, see this, look through both eyes, they come together. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like what I would write and what I would say, I want them to come together so that when I'm with someone, well, maybe I'm thinking, well, maybe that's not really what the goal would be. But for me, in some way, that is the goal. So I bring the two eyes into one eye,
Yeah, so, and I speak like that often too, but not always so fully in that sense. And
they read beautifully, and maybe they wouldn't sound, because it's true. You do take them in differently, don't you? I mean, I do. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so if I were to speak it, the analogy I tend to ground more in story or go a little shorter with. But for me, I have a very visual brain. And so for me, I'm seeing the analogies that I speak in.
Yeah, I'm very visual too. So, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, just getting used to speaking. That's the place where I would want to be, not lose the visual, because the visual is really strong for me and I can dive right into it. But I'll lose the person sitting in front of me if I really do. So I want to be able to bring those in line. That's would be one of my goals, to do that. Because I get shy, or these whole ideas, I don't know what I'm talking about, or oops, I forgot. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, today's call as a free training is to look at how to shape your ideas into action. And that's some of what we've been talking about, are different ways that we've played together, played either free challenge or in course or in website or in retreat or in all different ways. How have we played together, and how can you use these same concepts to shape your ideas as you put them into action? And some of that has been taught through story already today, through everyone else's stories. As in, I wrote some of these ideas out. Life took me somewhere else for a while, and now I'm coming back to it. Or, I did the entire course and realized that it was just a pinch, right, of what would be an entire bag of sugar. I don't know. I just started thinking of your donkeys and sugar cubes. Sorry, Lee. And so when you start to, how are you going to shape your ideas? It's a tricky question, because some of it's, shaping how you feel about yourself. Some of it's shaping the words on your website. Some of it's shaping the words you use to talk about what you're doing. But all of these are shapes that you have to choose to give. So earlier, Julia and I were talking about, okay, well, this is what you want to do, or this is where you see yourself. Well, what kind of strategies do you want to get there? And it's like, well, I don't know. There's like 100 different ones that we could use. And it's like, right. But which ones feel right to you? Which one feels like it's a marketing strategy, and which one feels like it would be fun to go do? These are two very different questions, depending on how you choose to answer it. And what you feel you have to do versus what you want to do can sometimes be different too. I know I like to operate through personal invitation. So different people at different times have received, I'm pretty sure Grace and Lee both have received personal video invitations from me, either solo or with someone else at different times in history of different courses. And that was like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to make 30-second to a 2-minute video and let you know, hey, Margaret, I think you got one of these too, even way back when. I could be wrong, but and I don't do it for every launch, and I don't do it every time, but and it's usually specifically saying targeted, but in a good way, right? Like, please come play because you're so ready for this, and it seems like a good fit. And sometimes that comes through me, and sometimes it comes through other people, but I always make myself available for that referral. So Grace was referred in through someone else, but I was on that video invitation because it's like, oh, Steph, just tell her what that program is, right? Like, I don't want to explain it because I've done it, but I'm going to do it again. And so you just tell her, right? And so it's nice to have those personal invitations, which is different than getting an email or hopping onto a call like this, where you get that sense of, what does it mean to play? What does it mean to tell your story, to talk to different people? Laura, that was one of my questions for you coming out of the video challenge, knowing that you were doing these live and on Zoom and Facebook. And I noticed that you didn't stop. And I'm the same way. I've not done a ton of live videos, but when people pop on and they're like, hey, how's it going? And you see the little pop like, or someone's watching you, and it changes how your brain is telling that story, because all of a sudden there's a new person who's just popped in the middle, and right? And you start, so I'm curious how it affected you, or what was different for you in this creation process and creation mode, Laura, doing it live. And because to me, lives feel much more like I'm speaking audience community instead of community tribe base. And that's just me. So
I would say that, from my training and what I teach my entrepreneurs, when a lot of times we pause in the middle of your sentence and to welcome someone that's coming on live, it's very difficult for the person that's been already watching to keep track of what you're saying, and it's very disruptive energy. So I find for me, when I teach my entrepreneurs, not to midstream go, oh, hey, welcome, welcome, because it's way past welcome. It's like, 10 minutes in. It's in the beginning, yeah, welcoming the tribe in. But I try not to do that, because then it affects the people that have already been there, trying to understand the storyline, and it's disruptive to them. And then for me to keep track of, well, what was I saying? So a lot of times towards the end, if I'll see who the names are, that's when I might mention something specific, but I try not to just say hello to that person at the time. As far as speaking to the you as I'm speaking, I would probably say the hardest one I did was today, working with where I was 5 years ago. And that's because our New Jersey was hit with Superstorm Sandy. So I was literally flashing back to faces that either I helped during that time or have helped our community. So it was very emotionally charged to flash back to those moments. And I did it in my book when I wrote my book, but my editor was like, there's no way people can handle the level that you all experienced. It's not, people couldn't read the book. So we had to cut out a lot of that, in the book, because it was just too much for people to handle. But yeah, I would say flashing back faces is what was happening within the challenge. Yeah.
It sounds like, at least from an editing standpoint, that the book had a purpose besides just sharing the experience or sharing about Sandy, but that it was a book in relation to your business. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was Healthy Business, Healthy You Toolbox. It was both my health, going through my health struggle. And in the middle of my health struggle, we got hit with Superstorm Sandy, financial challenges. There was 5 or 6 major extreme challenges. So it's just too much for a reader to handle the insurmountable pieces of what we were dealing with. So we tried to condense them almost into 2 sentences.
Yeah. And so that's almost, it's not that the story itself isn't viable, isn't good. It's just that it wasn't moving forward that specific scope and purpose of what you were creating. Whereas the story told in entirety could be an extremely healing and receivable piece if in a different scope or for a different purpose. Have you written the full story out at this point or published the full version in a different way?
The Superstorm Sandy story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at one point I did write a blog post with that segment. The challenge that we face with Superstorm Sandy is because it is such a personal experience within our community, and I worked with such a vast amount of people, I always was, the feedback I would always get is people would be left out. What about me? What about our town? What about our area? So it was hard to specifically state certain things because I didn't want to leave more scars for people that wanted to be heard, because it's true. It affected so many areas and so many friends and so many family members.
Yeah. I think what you're bringing up right now is something that comes up for how do you really address any major story. And it's not just Sandy. I mean, I was out in that area when 9/11 happened and was part of the evacuation process. So where I was located in New Jersey, where everyone was evacuated on boat out because the tunnels were collapsed. There was no way to get out of the financial district besides boat. And they're all shipped out to Jersey, and then we drove them back into the city. Right? This is a piece of history that's rarely talked about. It's how Jersey shores turned yellow and bricks and bodies and all sorts of things came up. These are stories that I don't talk about. I've never written them in full because it's not really fully related to what I'm going through. And there's been so many stories that often this comes up. Well, where do we cut the scope? How do we talk about this? One of the things, for Lee, who is in the audience and heard me tell a story about being a caregiver, about caring for my parents. A lot of you have heard some of these stories just from being around. What most of you don't realize, though, is I have a twin brother. I have a twin brother who was actually there when my grandma first had her strokes, but he freaked out, packed his bags, and moved 1,000 miles away and said, "You deal with it, Steph." And so I came up a couple of days before she was supposed to get out of the hospital. And guess what? She got out and came home about an hour or two after I had arrived at her house, days before I was even supposed to be there, days before she was supposed to be there, and woke up the very next morning to her having a major stroke and became her caregiver for the next 11 years. Yeah, Grace, I saw your face like, what? Yeah, for the next 11 years, I was a caregiver for my grandma. The third stroke was a major stroke. It took, it was like the half body droop. It cut half of her eyes on each side, her short-term memory. And so I became her voice in the world. She was my song and I was her voice. And that's where I learned a lot of the skills that I have now, is just authentically being there for her. So we'd go to a doctor appointment, and the stress of being judged, the stress of having to remember and tell the doctor, her brain would go blank. And so I would go up before and I would go and hang out with her, and we'd talk about this, and we'd create lists of what we needed to talk to the doctors about or go for groceries. And so when we go to the doctor's office, I'd whip out the list and be like, "Oh, Grandma, remember that thing with your wrist? Yeah, this happened, blah, 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 blah. Grandma, you said there's something going on with your eyes. Yeah, blah, blah," right? Because I became her voice. She could, as soon as you could trigger it, she could go into it. But if you asked her what was wrong, she just shut down. In the same way, I had a grandma there for me all of these years, the same grandma that I'd always been around, and yet my cousins never got to see her again. She always asked everyone to come one-on-one because it wouldn't stress her out and she could be herself, but they liked to come and see each other. So when the whole family would come, it would stress her out, it would shut her brain down, and she was just kind of like an empty shell hanging out. And, "Oh, sweet grandma, like, why isn't she in an old folks home, Steph? She should be in an old folks home." It's like, well, because the other 50 some weeks of the year that you're not here, she's normal and she cooks her own meals and does her own laundry, but she has no short-term memory. So learning new memories is really hard. Taking care of her medical, her eyesight isn't the best. So I'm in there cleaning out her fridge, making sure everything's taken care of, doing all the shopping, taking her to all of her doctor appointments. So I wasn't living with her, caring for her. I wasn't wiping her hiney or giving her shots every single day, but I was there for her. I was her voice. Right? To me, that was a very different type of caregiving than, being a terminal caregiver for my mom in the last 2 years of her life, while I watched the tumors physically grow everywhere because they were so fast growing. And, it's just very different experience. But when I tell these stories, it allows you to understand, like, I am very passionate about you being heard as you and the true expert that you are, without you or anyone else getting in the way and saying who you are, what you can, what you can't do. Fuck them, excuse my language, but like, be yourself and please show the world who you really are. It's what we've already resonated with and why we're here in the first place.
And I would just say, Steph, that was something that I was trying to also empower my tribe, to say you all have these amazing gifts. And you're like, again, because we can go Jersey. And I'd be like, it's bullshit was the word I use. I said, screw the lighting, screw the fact that maybe you're not perfect and your hair's not done and your makeup's not on. And we as women, unfortunately, have this, Adobe Photoshop problem where we have to be perfect. And I'm like, no, your message, it's not the messenger, it's the message. So share those stories, share the tools you have with others. And if nothing else, sometimes I'll be even a towel. I'll actually on purpose do a Facebook Live in a towel on my head with no makeup, just so that it's like the shock value to like reverse the paradigm and say, no, let's be real and help one another and lean in instead of being like this facade and everything's perfect. And I've shared with folks, I used to do radio and internet radio, and I loved it because you didn't have to do hair and makeup. That was my favorite modality. I love that. Radio, internet radio, great. With Facebook Live, it's a game changer for us as entrepreneurs, but it also comes with that negative chatter that's constantly in our head. Oh, wait, there's that gray. Oh, shoot, I shouldn't go live today. You're starting to see my dye line here, or, oh, my makeup's not just perfect. It's like, no, bullshit. Let's change the paradigm, and let's just lean in and share our stories and teach others through our experiences. And so again, I know I just went off, but that was really what I was trying to teach my tribe, that guys, it doesn't matter. Just do it. Do it no matter what.
Yep. Lee, were you on the call? Were you in the group of Writing That Converts that I taught when I got really sick and taught one of the sessions, like totally fevered out? Were you on that call? Maybe it was Margaret. You were there, right? Mm-hmm. I have no clue what I said, but every single person on the call was like, profound, it's amazing. And I'm like, okay, but I was going to do it. I transitioned into all of my in-person stuff online about 2 years ago. It was kicked off with the 30-day challenge, led into the first course that I offered online. It's the same curriculum I had been teaching for 8 years in person, but online. And I'm a teacher. It was easy for me to do that transition, to rearrange it to fit into modules and a course. And in all of this time, I've canceled one call. And that I was in the hospital with food poisoning, getting rehydrated, right? Like, it happens to the best of us, even with intention. And the rest of the time, even if I'm sick, I show up and I just mute myself a lot. But I still show up and I still do the best that I can. And I was in the super fevered state, like tissues piled everywhere, comfy as can be. And it was one of the most profound, because when I did speak up, it was whatever needed to come through, and it possibly wasn't even coming directly through me. It was just nice to be a channel that day. But you show up as you show up, whether that's comfortable, whether that's traveling, whether that's sick, it doesn't matter. I mean, granted, when you're on the way to the hospital to get an IV in your arm, it's really easy to cancel. And I apologize to everyone. And I'm like, sorry guys, I can't make it. I really wanted to try, and it's just not going to work. But you're right, Laura. You just show up and you be you. And often it's exactly as it's supposed to be anyway. And when you're comfortable showing that self, fine. I remember one call I went through with after having eaten an everything bagel and forgot to check my teeth. Whoops. We've all had those moments in life. It's called being human, right? Like, we just get to be ourselves, and it is important for others to see it. It's one of those reasons that I was like, I'm not going to create a new PowerPoint like this. And the content that we're going over, there is the 20-minute teach where I talk through a handful of these strategies. And I'll pull up a couple here in just a moment. But the reality is that these are the hardest things for me to teach, because it's how my brain works. So it's really hard to translate it into a module or into a course. If I'm teaching you this writing strategy, that's easy. But if I teach you how my brain takes everything you're saying, and then I get to, like, that's my magic. I don't know what I'm doing, but I do have a bunch of strategies that I've pulled and have put shape to, right? And I'm going to sneak into those as we go. So this is one of them that I use, which is how I was taught about sustainability. So when I was taught, the meaning of sustainability was working with tribes in Wisconsin as an educator. I spent a lot of time working on the reservations, talking to the educators of the reses, and how do we make this a universal thing. And when I was taught about sustainability, it was before that brand 7 Generations, but it's where they get the name from. It's not talking 7 generations that came way before you or the 7 generations that come after, but 7 generations means you are in the center, and everyone that you will have personally experienced in your life, if you're lucky enough, or if that's your path, these are your 7 generations. So when I look at my life, I knew my mom and my grandma and my great-grandma. And while I might not know tons about them, I knew them, right? And while it's not been my path in life, the children and your grandchildren and your greats are people that you actually get to experience throughout your life. And so anything that you're doing in your life, if you're doing it with the wisdom of all 7 of these generations, with those 3 that came before you and those that came after you, is the concept of creating something through sustainability, right? So when I think about Writing That Converts as a simple program, right? 10-week class, great. Well, that's my perspective of it. And then I start looking at, well, what am I going to do with this? And what am I going to do? Okay, so it's a 10-week class plus 50 training videos of story prompts. So you can go pull whatever story you want at any given time to weave into all of this structure and plug and play templates. But what happens next generation? What happens with the knowledge that I had that I want to pass forward? So it's, how do you take this information and create it in a way that's going to make sense for everyone before, during, and after who's been in yours? Margaret, the original program was not broken up into 2 levels. You've actually only done level 1. Level 2 is, here, I'm going to pause. Margaret just asked, what is the 2 different levels? So the copywriting program is, Margaret, while you've been gone, here's what happened. So there's been level 1 of the program, as Margaret knows it, as Lee's gone through it, is 10 sessions, all about copywriting. So we go over your voice brand brief, your bio, your homepage, your about page, sales pages, your experience design or the curriculum, the words that you use to describe what you're teaching, your videos, your marketing points, your opt-in sequences, your welcome sequences. So focused on copywriting, but really about product development, marketing language all around it. Level 2 came about when it was kind of the same thing as that story I shared about photography and how I hadn't done it for years, but everyone knew that I could do it. So they just started hiring me for it anyway. Writing That Converts Level 2 came about this way because I was in a program. I paid $17,000 to be in a year-long program led by 2 different coaches. And I got about 5 months into this year-long program and realized that they didn't see me. They weren't hearing me, and they could not understand what it is that I did. And so I convinced them to let me speak from their stage and to tell a story. So I was given a 10-minute window, no pitch, no ask window to just tell a story. And so I wrote a story that sells and sold $30,000 off of the stage for myself and $200,000 for them that I closed through the story that I shared on stage. So it was a win-win for everyone who was involved. The people in the audience got what they received and what they were looking for, whether it was from me or from the people whose program that was being led. And all of a sudden, my coaches saw me, and they both hired me to do work with them, to rewrite their sales pages, to fix their marketing points, to fix their points of invitation and their product positioning. Because for the first time, they could actually understand what it was that I did and how I got there. So last year, a handful of people said, well, we've done Writing That Converts a couple of times. Now what? What's next? Steph, we want you to teach us how to do that 10-minute story. And I was like, well, okay. How do you go and create webinars like they're nothing? And this one's very informal. So there's no PowerPoint that we're going through. But for each level, for Writing That Converts, for those 10 levels, there's a PowerPoint that goes for all 10, where we go through it and there's examples. And well, guess what? I spent 18 years working as an educator. Right now I'm on year 16 in writing. So education has still been the more major part of my life than writing, even though writing is my major career and what I've been doing. So it's just who I am, and it's easy for me in that sense. So if you can teach us how to write a 10-minute talk, and you can teach us how to do a 20-minute teach, so we have a 30-minute presentation that we can do from any stage. We have our interview talking points. We have we can tell people what the curriculum is and what we're teaching and what we're doing that quickly. Fantastic. And so last year I led it as a group program, as a mastermind that was Writing That Converts Level 2. Except for at the time it launched under 4 different titles because I didn't actually create it. They did. Right? They created it. They enrolled themselves. They created a whole group of people. It was beautiful. Everyone learned something amazing. Their stories were phenomenal because we did back and forth. So we did all sorts of story pulling, then write your rough draft, go turn it into something different. And so this is going to be the second time that it's taught online, and this time there will be PowerPoints that go with it. So there's a whole, what we're looking at right here, this is a page out of one of the workbooks for the program. And this is one of the concepts that I talk. So when you talk about, like, am I writing this to my tribe or am I writing it to my audience, and who am I talking to? Well, at different times, you're going to be asked to go speak to your great-grandmother. And other times you're going to be asked to speak to that generation that hasn't even arrived yet. When I tell a story to my nephew or to the 3-year-old girl that I live with here, I live in like a big Victorian inn right now. So there's all sorts of people in and out, and the inn owner has children. But I tell those children stories, and they know what I do with my work, just as they know mom is an interior designer. And, you know, that 3-year-old went and helped with a window design in the local community. And the store name was Buttons. So she took extra buttons and covered the floor of the display. So she brought her piece into, you know, like, because she's being taught that it's good to go be an entrepreneur, to add your ideas, to offer. And you can say no, but we could also say, yeah, that's a great idea, and how fun that you brought that in. Please, let's include this in what we're doing, right? So she's already being told to speak up and taught that it's okay in a safe space to provide ideas. That's a different story than I'd be telling my grandma and talking to my grandma when I'm sharing with her. But, you know, my grandma, stroked out as she was, missed the entire computer generation, lamented never really learning how to type, but she learned how to use an iPad. She learned how to use an iPad because I could put all of the pictures from Facebook or from wherever of nieces and nephews and cousins. And for her, it was swipe, swipe, swipe. I mean, it's such a simple thing to swipe through a handful of pictures. And to her was one of the most empowering things. The experiences that she had was I could hand her the computer. She could click on the photo app and open it up, and at her leisure, look and zoom in, you know, pinch in and pinch out, because she was kind of blind, right? So she didn't want to just look at pictures with me and, you know, as I wanted to go through them. She wanted to look at them in her own speed, in her own time, digest it as she wanted, and then move on. And so I just preload them on and leave her an iPad. And man, she was so proud of herself, right? But it's a different way that I would train someone older versus someone younger on technology. On technology, they'd have that figured out in 2 seconds and be teaching me, right? So I'd be like, great, so what are you going to show me today that I haven't even thought to go look for yet? And it's a different way of interacting just based on age, right? Do you have any questions, confusions on this piece? Do you see how you can tell stories differently? Go ahead, Grace.
Oh yeah, not on this piece exactly. Although I'm starting to wonder, how would I do that? My generations past are gone. But there's a lot of content here. I can see this is page 41 of a 57 PDF.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that. I'm going, okay, so to really do this program justice, how much time would you suggest committing to applying to this? Because there's going to be the 90-minute interactive things. There's going to be, you know, this and that. And then there's these PDFs to go through and really digest, not just breeze through. But
well, this PDF, Grace, is out of a 1-day workshop that I taught, and is turning into slides. Okay. So it's all being broken down into digestible bites. Now, if you look, so I typically say time in is time out. So if you're attending the class for 90 minutes, then what I would be looking from you is around 90 minutes of creation time, whether that's in meditation, writing time, video time, coding time. I don't know. Like it really depends on what project you're doing, but typically time in is time out. And this is how I personally operate, which is why I use it as a suggestion for you. So I do, all of my windows are these 90-minute to 2-hour windows where I am doing these teaches. It's the same for the coaching calls. But if we're going to spend 90 minutes together on a call, then I've most likely spent at least 90 minutes already thinking the whole thing through, thinking about your strategies, looking at what you're doing. So this morning, Julia Lewis and I had a call. And when we hop on it, we're chatting, catching up. And I was like, so when I was thinking about you this morning, I had this thought come up and this thought come up. And I know we've talked about this, but where is that? And when is that? You know, so you're putting in 90 minutes, but I'm also putting in 90 minutes of set up of strategy of looking at, like, it's not just that I can't function that way. I'm not that kind of person. Like, we get so involved with each other that I can't help but think of you even when we're not in session.
Yeah.
Because that's why I keep to a small group. That's why I'm not large. I've done large audience. It's not my favorite. My favorite is these lots and lots of little deep dives, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot more content than what you're going to be able to play with. 90 minutes in, 90 minutes out. I often say it's a 10-week program that can take you 10 months to implement.
Mm-hmm.
Because, some of it changes and transitions, and some of it's in creation mode, and some of it's in inquiry mode. Some of it's in, let's play with the concept, or let's go create it. And it's different each time. I'm going to slide. I'm looking for an image. I'll find it real quick. It's right here. So we looked at this concept as our very final question in the 10-day challenge is assume. What can you assume they already know? Right? That was day 10 of this challenge. And the reality is that is one small piece of this 4 different ways that I teach marketing, which is assume, agree, aspire, and argue. And this is almost always what I bring up every single time, every single sales page, and often to flush an idea out with you. So if you're saying, well, I have this program that I want to lead, I don't know how to talk about it, I don't know what to say. I was like, okay, well, great. What can we assume about you? Well, we are obviously going to assume that you're an expert at whatever you're teaching, but I'd like for you to show me how you became that expert. For me, if I'm here on the call, then I can assume that you have some interest in the content that I'm about to share. And I'm just going to keep going. And if it's not applicable, then just keep moving on. And if it is, great. And, wait 5 minutes and the topic will change and we'll be into something else. Maybe it'll hit you at a different space. Same with agree. What are different needs that we will both immediately agree has to happen, right? I am well aware that you do not want to go listen to me lecture to you for an hour and then get to ask 2 questions and be done with the call. That's not interactive. This entire call has been completely interactive. And if I talk for more than 10 minutes, I'm like, everybody there? Are you hearing me? Are we on topic? Okay, cool. Right? That's how I teach. That's my comfort level. So, but I can agree that the solution of, like, the reason that you come into these small groups is knowing that you're going to get one-on-one time throughout the calls, every single call. It's just, we can both agree on this, and that's how it's going to be. And then I look at, what are you aspiring to do? What value are you creating for your community? Right? It's not about what I can do for you. It's about, what are you aspiring to do for your community, and how can we make that happen? They're very different concepts. And so when you're creating a sales page or an offer, or even just going to have a conversation with someone, Grace, even in that 30-second little tiny video that we sent you, we talked about aspirations. What's something that you're, looking at creating? And I'm saying, listen, I know you're a death doula, and I know that this is a topic that not a lot of people have dealt with, and that you really are an expert. And 10 minutes into actually chatting on the phone with you, and you were like, well, I don't only have that expertise. I also have these 20 years and this 10 years. I'm like, okay, yep. Now the aspiration is to allow everyone else to see that expertise too, yeah? And then what is it that you're arguing? I'm really aware that arguments are going to show up. Traditional marketing and marketers will tell you that the 2 biggest arguments that you're fighting is, I don't have enough time and I don't have enough money. For me, and how I look at it, is inviting you into looking at what terrifies you. There is beauty in that which terrifies. And I'm inviting you to welcome in optimism. I'm not asking you, I am a realistic optimist. What we talk about, where I push you, what I see for you, is absolutely realistically possible for you, and is often what you're asking for yourself if you're willing to let go of the fear. Getting on stage and sharing my story was absolutely terrifying to me. Getting on stage was not at all. I had a career as as a kid, I was a performance storyteller and did theater and directing. And so it was very comfortable to be on stage as a character, to get on stage as me, Steph Ritz, sharing my journey, my story about fulfilling my parents' dying wishes, of, working on a bunch of book projects until I lost my health and ended up bedridden for a year and a half. On the back end of that, the man that I was with broke one of my ribs, and finding the strength to walk away from that relationship, move my entire life, feeling like I had no clue what to do because everyone in my life had already died. And so all of a sudden I was empty nesting and had never had kids. And now what do I do with my life? Right? And so I got on stage and I told this 10-minute story of how I went through this. And while I'm figuring it out, all of my clients, who cares if I figured it out for myself? My clients are doing it. So she went from 200 to 200,000 people, and it's now enrolling, and telling the stories of, even if I haven't figured it fully out for myself, I've always had full confidence in what I'm doing with the people I'm working with. That I've never doubted. That's something that no one had to teach me how to do what I'm doing. It's been a part of who I am. That's where earlier when I was introducing this challenge, I talked about this book, Am I Blue? Well, it was a book launch that I did when I was a freshman in high school with a dear friend. I launched a Gay Straight Alliance. She got cases of the collection of short stories about homosexuality and bisexuality and everything around it, donated as a pay it forward. And so, bam, all of a sudden there's an entire movement. Did I know that I was starting one of the first 10 gay straight alliances in America? No, I didn't. I knew that my friends were being bullied, that I had an opportunity, and I had support, and I didn't have to do it alone, right? So my job was to be the advocate, to work with the school, to get this open, to get it into the space. Her job was to get the cases of books delivered, and our job was to get the books into everyone's hands and create a safe space that could be lasting and passed on to other classmates as we move through the system. I didn't go learn someone else's business and start doing it. This is who I am. I've been training to be a teacher my entire life. I started working with kids when I was in 4th grade, 10 years old. It's always naturally who's just been me. And that is often what we're looking at day in and day out, is naturally, who are you? What can we assume about you? Right? Laura, as a publisher, I assume that you know the rules of writing. That I assume that you would recognize and be able to hear someone's commas in the way they speak as much as you could see it on a piece of paper, and recognize when it's not right on that page and change it because it doesn't match the syntax of their voice, right? That's an assumption I can make about you. Margaret, after getting to know you, I have the assumption that you know way more about me and my hormones and my femininity than I am even aware of. And my first job was in a women's health clinic, right? I assume that you know way more than me, because every time you open your mouth, my jaw drops. Because I'm like, wait, what? Oh, right? It's not the like, oh my God, I never knew that. It's the, oh, moment of, here's a new perspective that I haven't seen before, right? Assumptions can be very, very good as long as you're aware of them. Yeah? All right. Do we want to play with one more? Are these fun? Are these weird? Are these abnormal? Different? Familiar?
They're great. And I'm just going to let you know, I'm going to have to scoot in just a little bit. I got an appointment, but thanks so much for including me today.
Yeah, for sure, Grace. I'm glad you could come play. All right. I'm going to...
The 4 A's was very helpful. And, because I did mine today, I had it written down on my notes to prompt me as I was getting ready to go live. But just you going over that again, I just added additional pieces to those. They're very helpful, and they really get you to think as you're speaking. So that was very helpful.
Yeah.
So Steph, This is Patty.
Hi, Patty.
We did meet through a former coach that we both did some training with. My background is I have a daughter who has multiple rare disorders. And I've done some parent coaching and some trauma coaching, and just now starting to release a free program and then a paid program on how to help families, parents specifically, working with their medical team and how to kind of normalize their life and kind of get their life back from surviving in survival mode back to thriving. But I want to share an experience that I had that was really interesting. That actually with your 4As makes so much sense to me and is so exciting for me to be able to actually verbalize. I recently did a presentation at a conference, a medical conference that I've been attending for 11 years with my daughter, and they were very hesitant because I was going to talk to them about navigating the medical system, and they wanted a doctor in there. And I said, well, you know, it's really from the patient point of view, but I don't really need backup. It's really a positive thing. So they were kind of, okay, we'll have somebody sit in with you. It turns out that 4 different doctors came on their own, and it was such a cathartic session for all of us because it kind of started at the assumptions. The system's broken. We're all having a hard time. How do we do it? How do we build relationships? How do we kind of work together? And the organization actually came up to me afterwards, who's never approached me, and wants me to do a toolkit for them. So it's interesting looking at your descriptions as I'm going forward and starting to do these programs online and trying to be able to reach out to more people. Originally, I'm going to start with patients and then reach out to more children's hospitals to really kind of think through how to get past that, because there's so much anger on both sides that I think I was able to key in on the assumptions that we both had and the issues that we both had and kind of get them to come together to kind of move forward to what the solution might be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think as people who come from a society now that are used to being pitched to constantly, sometimes it's really nice to be reminded what we already know of someone else. I'm not making this assumption about you, but this is a different assumption that I am making, right? Like, please don't assume that I'm about to speak negatively about doctors, because some of the best things that I've been through are amazing. It's the same thing with every single time a nurse or a doctor told me that I was doing this amazing, extraordinary thing for being there for my grandma. And I'm like, I'm just doing what had to get done. Like, what would you have done? Left her on the floor to die? No, you pick her up, you take her to the doctor. Like, that's just called being a decent human being. But the assumption was that I was compromising my entire life to be there for her, because that's their perception, the doctor's perception of the attitude that I was supposed to be coming in with, what they were assuming of me that was lacking. Right? And to prove them wrong was every single doctor that I had to prove wrong, that I'm like, no, you're here. You're our friend. It's the same thing with, like, policemen are my friends. Like, I don't care if you're doing illegal things. They're my friends. They have helped me more times than anything else that I could have done in my life. Like, cops are my friends. And if you're doing something illegal, then maybe that's something for you to consider. But for me, they're my friends, and they have rescued me so many times. So Patty, and when you're communicating to them, to address that as like a very forward thing, being like,
yes. And one of the statements that I kept making was, maybe there aren't bad doctors. It's just not the right fit for you. And really demonizing the doctors is a real thing right now that everybody wants to do. And it really wasn't. It was find the right ones that you can work with and find, just move on if they're not the right ones, but find the right ones instead.
Yeah. And I know Laura's got a story about firing her doctor and moving on because they weren't accepting of some of her holistic practices. And that just wasn't okay. I mean, there's more to it than that. That's the super simplified version of that story. But I've seen it, and I've seen the same thing. My mom's cancer was not diagnosed. She knew something was wrong. She had a freckle that was raw on her foot for months and months and months. And she kept going to the doctor, and they kept telling her it was nothing. And so she eventually paid outside of insurance, went to a private doctor, and within a week, her toe was cut off, her lymph nodes had been cut out because it was too late at that point, right? So who knows what would have happened otherwise? But she absolutely villainized that doctor, and it turned out to be an entire health insurance scam. He was being paid to not actually run the tests. It was an HMO thing, right? So while she did villainize him and brought it all up online, she did it very specifically of being like, here's the timeline, here's exactly what happened, here's when we went to the other doctors and it happened. And it was enough that it led everyone else to be like, well, I was assuming I was the only one who had that. Well, I was assuming that I was the only one not getting tested or not feeling heard. Oh, you mean I could just find $100 and pay a third party to tell me? Oh, I never even thought that that was an option, right? So it's really interesting when you start going into the assumptions that people are making of you as well as not. And it's the same thing, like villainizing a doctor doesn't necessarily mean that the doctor's bad, but maybe not the right fit for you. You know, if you have a doctor who's telling you to go get a bottle of lavender oil for your nightstand and eucalyptus for your bath, and holistic practices or essential oils are not a part of your life, you might think they're kind of crazy to be recommending. Wait, what? You're a doctor. What's the medicine I'm supposed to be using? Lavender oil? Melaleuca? You know, like you pick it. It doesn't matter. But again, it might just not right fit. Assumptions about from both sides. So fascinating to see. Well, so Patty, what is an assumption that you can make about them going forward?
I think what I really heard from the doctors is that they are struggling as much as we are. And that at least many of the doctors really want to try to figure it out. The head of the children's department where this was being held has also asked me to come and speak to his doctors and do a similar kind of talk for them. So I'm very much a facilitator. I'm very much like, we can figure this out together. And this is so much my personality. And I've tried, it's been 4 years since I started, and it's so exciting to be in a position where I'm like, oh my gosh, it just happened organically that both sides want to come together. And I think that it can really be a big impact.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think where we're heading now is different than where I've seen the medical industry before. And that's a willingness to a recognition that what's happening isn't working, isn't sustainable. And there's about to be a huge global crisis around it if people don't start listening. And the only people who can change it are from the inside. And all of a sudden there are ears listening in ways that I've never seen before in the medical industry. And I know it's partly political driven, and I'm not going to even touch it with a 10-foot pole, but it's happening. And it's happening now. And the people like you who've been sitting there waiting for years, please listen, please listen, please listen, please listen, right? All of a sudden they're like, we need it and we're ready. But without you being ready, haven't gotten yourself there, as well as then, like you're saying, you're even in development for some of these courses and pieces. But yeah, as an advocate, you got to keep going and keep saying, and this is true for any of us. And this is where it took me a long time. And, we did meet through a similar coach and all of that work, where I never, ever referred to myself as a marketer because I wasn't that kind of marketer. But I am. This is all marketing talk that we're doing here. Everything that we're doing is marketing. But it's not what I call myself because it's not traditional marketing. It's advocacy. It's a very different concept. But we have to be our own brand advocates. We have to be our own brand ambassadors. And if we want anyone else to stand up for us and what we're doing, we have to know what that is first and be very confident and comfortable with that voice in order to share it at a broader level. And that's just how I personally feel about things. And you'll see it, and we'll go into it. Actually, it's the bonus course that comes with all of this. Every December, I do a 3-week teach. That's one of the sessions is a content map. So how do you map out your creation for the year? And that's part of what we look into is through advocacy. So how do you do your marketing as an advocate for yourself? And then the other two is I have this book project outline that I do one-on-one going into retreats. It's like a $3,000 package to go through this signature system that I use. And I teach it as a group level in December each year. as like a bonus. So, like Lee did the course, Margaret did the course 2 years ago, she still gets to come in every single year. I don't do ending bonuses. I do continuation bonuses, right? So every single month there's a call that you guys like, it's open coaching every single month from here until who knows when. And it's the same with that course, because every single year you're going to have new content and new courses and a new marketing something, because you have to have a plan, and it's best to review it at a minimum once a year, right? Minimum once a year, you should be looking into that plan. So of course I'm going to include it every single year and invite you to come back and do it every single year, because there's going to be different stuff, right? Whereas other people are like, no, how do I get more money out of you after each piece? So now you can pay $500 to do this program each time. It's like, I'd rather just give it away, because that's part of continuing education. And knowing that a 10-week program might take you 10 months to implement. Well, what kind of support do you have for 10 months if there's no one else there for you anymore? But I also know that it takes time. Laura, you were talking about how you just had a lot on your plate, and it takes time to do these videos and to have good Wi-Fi and to like think about what you're going to say and then go make them, right? Like it takes time. And so there is no, I didn't put like, if you do your 10 videos in the 10 days, then you'll be eligible to win prizes. It's like, did you make a video? Did you get into the group? Did you try to participate? Well, then guess what? All of this stuff unlocked for you, because you made the effort to show up. You made the effort to be part of the community and to be there. And that to me matters as much as going to do it. Because if you go do it and you haven't taken the time to think it all through, then what comes out is verbal vomit. And to me, that's gross. I'm sure you've read some of these books and seen some of these programs where you're like, wow, that's what I paid for? I didn't get much. Goodbye, Lee. Great to see you again. So yeah, there's a lot of creation. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of assumptions that we're all making about each other every single day in every situation. I think that's part of our society, though, and how we've been taught to look at the world, right? Is the assumption of self, and then figuring out how we're different from there, right? The sameness. Well, of course we think the same. Oh wait, we don't think the same at all, right? So one thing I do want to give you all, I'm gonna pull up my screen share again. This page here, stephritz.com/success. Copy. Where's my chat? I'm gonna drop it in the chat for you all. One is the entire 30-day sequence that we went through, the challenge in its original format. Originally, it was 3 videos that was offered as a brainstorm or a meditation, just to get thinking. So we went through, right here, you should recognize some of these questions. Who were you when you were on your own hero? Who are you 3, 5, 10 years ago? Come into part 2, who's your community tribe audience? What do they already know? And so if you want to continue the challenge, the rest of the questions are here for you, as well as some training videos or meditations. It's at stephritz.com/success. There's no password protection. There's no nothing. It's just videos for you to go play with as a free course. I do, Zoom controls, they're always hiding the important bits. I did want to look at this one just to get your brains thinking. It can be a little bit longer as one final way to organize things. So this is, if you think about, I don't have the graphic in here. So if you think about the traditional storyline that we've been taught, we think of the mountain, right? Where the climax is at the top and you've got to work your way up into the story, and then you get over the side and it's the resolution on the back end. This familiar story model that we've been taught. Yes, no. Have you heard this, right? Yes. Okay. So that is the core concept that we're taught of storytelling, right? To open it, take it to a point of action, and then close it back down. Except for the way that I was taught instead is more like a staircase, walking up and walking down. And I was taught to do this in something called a yay, boo style. And so if you start looking at your timeline of life or history or whatever it is that you've gone through, but you hold yourself to a yay, boo structure as you build that timeline, it allows you to create all of those mini right? Those leading up to the big moment of whatever that might be. But the reality is that none of us have lived one big moment. We are a collection of lots of little moments. And so the yay boo allows you to do that. It also keeps us from doing things where we, instead of going, yay, boo, yay, boo, 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 right? Like it's so easy for us to go down that channel of, well, this went wrong, and then this went wrong, and then this went wrong. But if you slow down to look at where were the yays in between this, or what was the learning or the perspective that you can give it a yay instead of a boo, and continue the story that way, it allows us to celebrate each moment with you instead of having to celebrate just the whole moral, right? So here's an example from the first time that I sat down to do this in getting ready to do that stage talk a couple years back, right? And so I gave myself a semester off between high school and college. Yay, right? And then I watched my gram during that semester off have her major stroke. Boo, right? But I saved her life by getting her to the hospital on time. Yay! And then I got banned from the family Christmas in order to take care of her and become a caregiver, which was a boo, because, you know, who wants to not be allowed to come home from Christmas on their first year after high school, right? But in that same way, I really got to find some of my purpose of helping others to voice their passions, which is a huge yay. And then my dad, my birth father, who I was estranged from, his lungs collapsed and I watched him die 6 times, which is a big boo, right? But and then on the back end of it, I really got known as a game changer, changing educator who was headhunted in a time where there weren't any jobs. Yay! You know, so life can go on and on and on and on. But if you allow us to see the yay boo, and that structure of flow of the negative, positive working together through all aspects, right? Like it wasn't until later in life that I could look at becoming a caregiver and really finding my purpose of helping others voice their passion. I didn't see that until later. If I had written this out at the time, I wouldn't have that yay. Looking at it with the perspective later, absolutely, that gave me such insight into how to be a voice for those while living and after, and in all aspects before. I mean, it's not surprising that I've worked with autistic children and work with a lot of dyslexic adults or special needs adults or ADHD, because our attention and our brains, it doesn't matter as long as you can be seen and heard, and we can still shape those ideas into action, right? So it's okay that your actions might look different than someone else's as long as they speak into who you are as a person. So if you start looking at your timeline or your stories and these yay boos, it might shift something for you just a little bit. And that's, you know, Laura, when you're like, it's just too heavy, I couldn't go into all of it. When creating it, looking at the yay boo, it helps us not get stuck down there, because you immediately give us a taste up each time. Yeah. All right. You all are looking really full. Yeah.
What you just said, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, yeah, wait, if I could separate out the heavy and then go, what's the tool that we learned? That would be the yay, and then go to the next one. Okay, but what was the tool that we got? You know, so that way it'll be easier for the reader or the listener to go, okay, that was bad, but oh wait, that's the tool that they could put in their own tool belt too. I think that would make it much more palatable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, you know, when I shared about having my rib broken by the man that I was with, I talked about it as in I had done this 30-day video challenge. It was part of why I was transitioning my business online, but I was at home healing from a broken rib, and here are people that I was interacting with and engaging with every single day for 30 days where I was hiding this giant secret. Because on film, you can talk like this and no one's going to know that you can't move your core. So I was living a secret in front of everyone else where they had no clue what I was really experiencing in life, and I had buried it. So when I shared that information, and the people who were in that challenge in the audience were like, oh, no, right? But I also shared that I gave him 30 days to get out of my house. And the day that he had to have all of his stuff out was the day that I flew to my very first business conference and got to meet my business family in person. And it was a huge yay, because they're still all my family and we're still all friends. And we were hanging out and, heading to Germany, and Christmas with this one and Hanukkah with that one. Like, we just do our thing together, and we're still great, great friends 5 years later. But when you bring it in the yay boo or the boo yay, it changes everything. This isn't the booyah of Army. It's a little different, right? So, but it's how we digest. I could have left you down there of like, oh, and it's depressing, and a broken rib, and there's no family, community, and family's all dead, and the community's online. But no, I immediately brought it into, and I got to walk straight into the arms of all these people who really did love me and give me the strength to walk away and supported me through this entire thing. Like, I didn't tell my brother and sister at first. The first people that I told was my business family online. And the first thing that they did was immediately gift me essential oils made for myself, and tarot sessions and tapping sessions, and because it was a group of healers. It was the first time in all this time that they'd known me that I asked for help. And they said, we are here for you. You give and give and give and give. It is your turn to receive. And you actually asked for it. So please let us heap it on you. Right? That's what we do in community, isn't it? And it's, to me, why it's so important that we get to engage and talk to each other through this. Because what Patty was sharing absolutely sparked something for, I can watch it. We're all sparking each other here. It's like a log does not burn in one place, right? So, well, good. Yeah, Laura, I think that Yay Boo is going to be very helpful in storylining some of these really intense pieces. It also helps us move from concept to concept of what we're doing. So for someone who's got multifaceted talents, it allows you to start weaving them together in a way that, like, can you all see how photography has helped me as a writing coach? Is it pretty transparent? It took me only like 8 years to figure out the tie between the two, right? What's obvious to you might be completely blind to the person who's sharing it or who's doing it. And that's why it's so important to work, in my opinion, to get together in these groups and work together in a group to be seen by everyone else. So this was very informal, very not typically how I do these trainings, but felt really right today. I even had a training and I tossed it and just did this instead, because that's what wanted to come forward. So I hope you all received something from this that'll help you either instantly or maybe come play in the future. Some of you have special offers from playing in different programs, and I'm happy to chat with you again about what that would look like. Do we have questions? Do y'all have what's coming up for you? Shares, insights, anything before we wrap this up? Thank you, Grace.
So Steph, the Yay Boo style is really a really big insight for me, because so much of what we've gone through has been challenging, but yet how do you bring out what's gone well and what insights we've gained from it? And I think that's going to be huge with me starting my classes and being able to share. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I've gotten lots of notes here. I'm not sure I'm ready to work with you right now, but hopefully as my program progresses, I would definitely think about it in the future. Thank you.
You're so welcome, Patty. I'm glad you came to play. Yeah. Julia, Laura, Margaret, Grace said she's heading out in a second. I'm unmuting you three, maybe. Laura, are we unmuting each other at the same time? Is that what's going on? I can't unmute you for some reason. All right. Laura, Margaret, Julia, anything more to add to our call today? Julia, you've heard most of this?
Well, it's always good to hear it again. It's always, it's like, One of the things I heard today that I thought was interesting was when you were describing yourself as being the voice for your grandma, being the advocate, the caregiver versus being a voice and being her voice. And I thought, oh, because I'm in a lot of caregiving situations right now. And what I realize is that I'm the one that's recognizing what's going on with them. And I'm the one that's putting all the dots together. And so I'm really their voice to explain what's happening.
In a way that, especially because you have the meta, you can see it in a way that they might not even see it's happening for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That was the first time that I put together that my grandma's, what she thought was food poisoning was really bad food in her fridge that she just couldn't see had gone bad. And it changed how I was caring for her and what, it just meant that instead of just grocery shopping and let her put her groceries away, it meant that I'd show up and I'd clean out the fridge before we went grocery shopping and put the groceries away, it just, she couldn't see it anymore. So it shifts how you're caring for it as well as becoming their voice. And yeah, that it's, to me, when I say caregiver, a lot of people instantly think of, like changing someone's diapers or giving them shots and living with them and helping them to the bathroom, whatever it is that you have to do. And for me, it was very, very different. She was very independent and absolutely needed someone there regularly, right? But the voice was the most important part of my caregiving, which is a very different experience than most caregivers. So, yeah. Cool. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you.
Laura Margaret, anything to share?
I think I was with Julia at the same time. I was wondering, you used to have, I went through your branding photos. I thought there are a few photos very, very lovely, very charming. Where do you do that? I remember you used to put combine with the book retreats actually.
The photos?
Yeah.
Like to get your headshots or to get
headshots.
Yeah. So at retreat, I've brought in different photographers. And
now you separate it, right? Where do you do that? Like I saw you posted some on the webpage.
Yeah.
It looks very, very nice. Very charming.
Thank you.
It's actually I forgot her name, but she's probably a chiropractor. It's so lovely. Like it brings out the best of her with a little the heart.
Just Julia.
That's me.
Oh, it's you. Oh, that's so lovely, that picture.
Oh, thank you.
With your, yeah. So here, I'll show you what we're talking about here in a second. Screen share. And we want this one. Let's see, Steph Ritz /photos. So all of the photo work that's been done with one-on-one clients has been so far outside of retreat. It was other photographers that I was bringing in. This year, they've started bringing me to them. So like Alon brought me down to his house and I did these shoots all within 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's a different location.
This one's across that's Nicole Diavola, and she teaches yoga at a neighbor's house. Her neighbor just happens to be an Academy Award winner for Coco and Toy Story 3. But these are all on location where they brought me in. So this is at Nicole's house. And then you see, like, here's one of the heart pictures. This is, we walked up the street and we're in different spaces. So that's Julia, who's on the call here at Nicole's house in Marin. And so she arranged it to be, instead of a one-on-one, a two-on-one. And the two girls came because they both did a mentorship program. So when I offer the 6-month mentorship windows, that one of the options is that you get to add on one-on-one time with me for a fraction of what it would be as a standalone price. So it's almost like a tack on or an add-on. And so they arranged, but the group gets to do it. I only do one per group round per 6 months at this low price point. And then they figure out when they want it. And so what was that, February that we went and played? January, I was in LA for the one-on-one brand. February, I went down and for Julia and Nicole. And then March, I went down and back down to LA and did like these guys here, this couple, and did theirs. But this was at retreat. That was the photographer at retreat, and I just took.
Oh, that's a retreat. Okay.
I took that was her camera at retreat, and I was like, "Give me that. I'm gonna take some of you." And Michelle B here, she submitted a headshot to for a speaking gig, and they told her that she couldn't use it. She had lost 60 pounds, 60 pounds from her last headshot. And they said, but you don't look like this anymore. We refuse to market with this. We need a new headshot. And so I did an iPhone photo shoot with her, which is what led to getting the camera. So all of these photos are like this. These are all at Alon's house, or at, like, these are all in Nicole's house here of Julia's. And then bringing me into different events like Jack Canfield, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Ashton Kutcher. This guy's the founder of Make-A-Wish Foundation, right? So Brandon Steiner owns the Yankees. Brian Smith created UGG boots. But I grew up on speaker training. Like, this is what I was doing before I was writing. And actually, while I was getting my writing degree, I was using photography to pay for my college years for those first couple of years doing event photography, you know? And so there's the event stuff too. But really the portrait work, this is what I was doing. This is how I paid for my writing degrees, was photography. But he brought me down. We did 4 days and rewrote his entire website and rebuilt this entire web platform. And if you know Alon, you can absolutely see his character leaking out.
Yeah, this is the best.
So this was a $10,000 retreat where he brought me in for 4 days and we redid his entire platform. So yeah, but it's him. It's him as the spiritual person, right? There he is with his didgeridoo and his flute. It's Alon, who's the corporate guy wearing his, pocket square or t-shirt, or, just having fun with it. So these are the photos that you were asking for, and how do you get that? And right now it's not a standalone product unless you're planning on bringing them to you or you're coming here, which isn't that far for you, if I remember correctly, because I'm
too far.
I'm back into the Northern California redwoods, an hour from Oregon. So yeah.
So now it's it's a part of the retreat, book writing retreat.
Actually, this year I'm not running a retreat.
Oh,
I got booked to go out to Germany for 3.5 weeks instead. So I'm flying to Germany instead of leading group retreat. For
next year?
What?
Next year?
Next year. This year, for the people that I was speaking to that seemed most interested in retreat, they instead all joined the mentorship program. So they, once a week, every week, we get on the phone for 90 minutes and create, and piece by piece plug through it all. So some weeks we're working on graphics and creating postcards, and other weeks we're writing titles and taglines, and other weeks it's the welcome sequence or this opt-in, and we just started creating it all. So right now there's no retreat on the table. If there was a group, that would be a different story, but I'm traveling. I don't have time to enroll into it, which is also what led to writing that Converts Level 2. Level 1 was the same thing. Like, I really want this content, but I can't come to retreat, and I don't want to wait a year. So how else are you going to deliver it? And I was like, oh, I guess I've got to come up with another way. And Level 2 is a lot of what we do at retreat was built to be a 3-piece retreat as a one-on-one process. So the first level would be, we'd create an outline, interview a bunch of stories out of you, and come out with somewhere between 10 and 50 pages of content that could be broken into articles and copy, and then re-outline to go create it into the next level of the book. And that's how I did these big book project developments, where it wasn't just the book, but the entire platform to hold it at the same time. And so the retreats were meant to be in 3 cycles. And right now that's where I'm working on the courses. So I built the first level. Now the second level has come out, and the third level has only been taught in private workshop, not as a course yet, but that'll be next year that the third piece will come out. So it's just layers upon layers of accessing the information. So I'm not quite sure about the retreats. The retreats were pre-online. I don't know. It's interesting. Everyone has different wants and different needs, but right now it's maybe next autumn.
I'm still learning your process. I feel I can still relax into wherever I am in my business. I can still somehow relax into to see I'm weaving one piece of the story in a different way. So if it's not this year, maybe next, or it's another way, I can still weave in the winter time. It's a different program.
Yeah, well, I mean, so Margaret, since you've done level 1, level 2 is at a different price point for you, and I'll send that to you because you have a graduate price point instead of, so it's a little bit different. And then when and it's the offer's been made for everyone else too. So if you're buying level 2, you get level 1 again. So you would get it. If you're planning on doing the December course, it's to your benefit to say yes now, because then you get the whole 10 other weeks that go with it. And then the free course is in December, and level 2 starts up again in January. So you wouldn't have to do level 1 again, but you would get access to all of that coaching and content again, live, instead of just in the library. But I'm not sure if you've gone and looked, but you should have access to every round of Writing That Converts that's been taught, your round, and every class that's come after as well. So now there's 3 different videos for each module that you can go learn off of inside the Ritz library.
Is that level 2 are going to be 10 weeks, 10 sessions at the same time?
Yep, they're both 10-week programs that'll just run 10 straight weeks. So the level 1 is September to November, and then in December we have the free course, and then in January to March we'll do level 2, and both programs are 10 weeks. Yeah,
great.
Here I can let's see, so copywriting, here we are, this one. Yeah, September 12th to November 7th. There are Wednesdays at 1 o'clock all the way through. And that's, I mean, there's, the people in Mylene's getting on the calls at 10 o'clock at night, and, someone like Tina in New Zealand or Australia is getting on at 4 a.m. So I kind of just picked that middle time that was good for most people around the world. And so Wednesdays at 1, pretty much off and on for a while. And then again, the first Thursdays are our momentum calls, which you still have access to, Margaret, and then would be a continuation. As long as I'm running the momentum calls, you have access to them. So you still have that whether or not you come through. The second level then, starts first week of January, or second week, and then goes through March. And it's 10 weeks, but there's only really 5 modules because it's so heavily focused on story and storytelling and using that to position your credibility that we do fewer modules, but spend way more time diving into pieces of them. And part of that's because of the developmental edit. So this one comes with, submitting your 10-minute story and going through the whole editing, the whole developmental process of it. From this, when I ran it last time, came stage talks, an entire book, programs, TEDx talks, panel discussions, interviews. So everyone used it in different ways, but it's like speaker training. So how do you build your presence versus how do you build your platform? And that's what that's how I'm differentiating these two. Because one is really a course and the other is this story piece is a lot more masterminding because there's so much story pulling and reshaping and re-examining from different perspectives. But always live and interactive and small group. And in order to get into the speaker training piece, you have to have gone through level 1 because they need all of those things in order to play with you in level 2 on this. Yeah. So, and I mentioned some of these. The Crystal Clear Content Map is that live course. You get, I have an interactive incentive as a bonus. So I understand that the one-on-one time is a lot of the magic time and what a lot of people want as well as can't afford. And so I build it into the program as an interactive in session. So for each 4 of 5 sessions that you attend, which could be a total of, 20 weeks is 20 sessions. So you can earn 4 or 5 different one-on-one calls with me just by showing up and being part of the group. Because I really do rely on the group to support each other and move things forward. And so there's an interactive in session. If you want the one-on-one with me, then show up for your classmates too. And then, of course, the whole Stories That Sell on library inside the Ritz library. So, inside the Ritz library here, it's a big library. So inside of it, you will see, like for writing that converts, if you were to go into any of these modules, you have all recordings from the prior groups that have been taught. All of their videos are here already. And so that's instant access as well as the worksheets. Thank you, Patty, for playing. So the all 3 prior classes are in here, and then in Stories That Sell, all of those videos are here as well. So the welcome piece is here, the whole 30-day challenge and the different 10-day video challenge that we've done, they're all here for you in the Ritz library already, Margaret, or if you're planning on coming to play. So you'll find them. Yeah. So there's a lot in that library just waiting. But a lot of that's where we'll get to, it'll be week 6 and the topic will come up and I'm like, oh, that's in Stories That Sell when we ran this challenge. Here's where to go find it and go do these 3 exercises. So a lot of it's to make life easy for me too, so I can reference what it is and go have you look at it, and then we can talk about it on the back end once you've done the homework piece, just to make our time more efficient. So that's how I use the Ritz library. I don't know if that's been that transparent, but that's how my membership portal is built. Is once you're in, you're in. It's just a matter of when you choose to come in that way. I'll tell you right now, though, that the last round of story weaving was promised to only be available to that class. So this will be the first time writing that converts level 2 is entering the Ritz library on a public level. So this will be like the foundational movement of that course forward. Even though it's been taught, it was privately taught last time. So, and there were a lot of tears and it was very emotional, and it's in better, more digestible format now. It's very heavy work that we do, especially when you look at where you've been in life, right? So I think I've cried with both of you already. It happens. So, well, thank you, ladies. I'm way over on time, which is normal for me. And so do you have any more? Are we good? And say farewell until next time.
Thank you, Steph. Oh. It was nice meeting you, Margaret.
Nice meeting you. Steph, one last question. What was the link to the library?
Ritz library?
Is it a different URL or is
No, it's at Ritz library.
It's on the same. Okay.
Yeah, it's all inside there. So when you log in, you'll find all the access for it there. So yeah.
Nice to meet you again.
Thank you, ladies. It was great to see you again, both of you. Laura, I look forward to catching the rest of your videos. Are they all up now, live?
Yes, I put them. Looks like. I try to help you make it easier. It came all at once, but better late than never, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll hop into those in the next little bit. So thank you so much for coming to play. I'm super grateful. And with that,